An elderly woman loses her home in a fire, and after moving to a farm and losing her husband, she finds something in the barn he never let her enter. What she discovers brings her to tears. It was a quiet evening. Camille and Todd had just finished dinner and were sitting in the living room, reminiscing about the good times they had shared over the years. The house was filled with photos and memories of a lifetime, pictures of their children scattered around the room, a painting of their smiling grandchildren hanging on the wall. Everything there had a story, a special meaning. Suddenly, Camille noticed a strange smell. "Todd, do you smell that?" she asked, with a tone of concern in her voice. Todd frowned, getting up to investigate. Before they could understand what was happening, they heard a loud crackling noise coming from the kitchen. Todd ran over and saw the flames starting to spread across the ceiling. "Camille, quickly, we need to get out of here," he shouted, his heart racing. Panic set in. Camille grabbed her purse while Todd tried to extinguish the fire, but it was too late. The flames were already out of control. The couple rushed out of the house as the fire consumed everything in its path. Outside, hand in hand, they watched the house they had built over decades being devoured by the fire. Camille began to cry. "Todd, the photos, the memories of our children, our grandchildren, everything is in there." Todd held her tightly, trying to comfort her. "I know, dear, I know." He looked at the burning house, feeling a tightness in his chest. Every photo, every object inside was an important piece of their story. Time passed, and the firefighters finally brought the fire under control, but it was too late. The house was destroyed, reduced to ashes and rubble. All that remained were distant memories, etched only in their minds and hearts. "We've lost everything, Todd. The photos of our children, those letters you wrote to me, the things that belonged to my mother. It's all gone," Camille said, her voice choked with emotion as she stared at the ruins. Todd embraced her, searching for the right words, but he too was broken inside. "We'll get through this together, Camille. We'll make new memories. We still have each other." In the days following the fire, now at their eldest son's house, Camille felt an immense weight on her chest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the flames consuming everything. But what tormented her most were the memories of what she had lost, especially the antique china set that had belonged to her mother. That set was more than just plates and cups. It was a link to her past, to her childhood. She remembered her mother preparing tea on Sunday afternoons, using those same pieces that no longer existed. "I can't believe I lost that china set, Todd, and those rare vases of the portraits of my parents. I should have taken those things out. I let everything be destroyed," Camille said, her voice filled with sadness and regret. Todd, sitting beside her on the sofa in their new home, held her hand. "Camille, it wasn't your fault. There was no way to know this would happen. But those were the only things I had left of my parents, Todd. Now I don't even have that anymore." Tears started to roll down her face, and she quickly wiped them away, as if trying to erase the pain along with them. Todd looked at her with tenderness and understanding. "I know how much they meant to you. I know they were more than just objects, they were memories. But the memories, Camille, no one can take those from you. The Sunday teas with your mother, the stories your parents told, all of that is still with you right here." He pointed to her heart, trying to soothe her. Camille looked at him for a moment, then rested her head on his shoulder, seeking comfort. "I know, Todd, but it's not the same. Seeing those objects, touching them, made me feel close to them again. Now it feels like they're even further away." Todd hugged her, feeling the depth of her pain. "We'll find a way to honor those memories, Camille. Somehow, we'll rebuild what we lost, I promise." Camille closed her eyes, trying to hold on to those words. "I don't think we should forget what happened," Todd said, holding her hand firmly. "But maybe in a different place we can find some peace. Start over somewhere where new memories can be made." Camille sighed, knowing he was right. The house that was once full of life now felt like a graveyard of memories. "You're right, Todd, let's look for a quieter place. Maybe that's what we need." And so, after a few weeks of searching, they found a small farm far from the city. The place was peaceful, surrounded by trees, with an air that reminded them of simpler times from their youth. When they arrived, Camille took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the countryside and the fresh greenery. "I think we've made the right choice," she said with a slight smile. The first in a long time. Todd smiled back. Here, we can start anew, Camille. Build new memories without erasing the old ones. It was a simple but cozy house, situated on a small farm. The surrounding area was calm with friendly neighbors and the gentle sound of trees swaying in the wind. Far from the hustle and bustle of the city, time seemed to move more slowly there, almost as if they were in another world. Look, Todd, it feels so peaceful here, Camille said. It's the kind of place where you can really breathe, you know? Todd smiled, pleased to see a glimmer of contentment in her eyes. It's exactly what I imagined for us, Camille. A place where we can feel at peace. The house may be simple, but I think it has everything we need. They walked around the property, exploring every corner. The house, though modest, had a special charm. The wide porch was perfect for sitting and having coffee in the mornings, and the trees around provided refreshing shade, creating a welcoming atmosphere. This porch, I can already see myself here sitting and watching the sunset, Camille said with a gentle smile on her face. We could even plant some flowers there, Todd suggested, pointing to an empty spot in the garden. Maybe even a small orchard. What do you think? Camille chuckled softly. You and your ideas. But I like that. It could be nice to add some color around here. They entered the house and the air inside was fresh, with a faint scent of old wood. The large windows let in plenty of light, and the rooms, though simple, were cozy and inviting. At that moment, they both knew they had found more than just a house. They had found a place where they could rebuild their lives. As they explored the backyard further, they came across an old barn half hidden behind some trees. It was large but in terrible shape. The wooden boards were worn, the roof had holes, and inside it was even worse. Dirt everywhere, cobwebs covering the corners, and a strong smell of mold and animals that had once passed through. Camille wrinkled her nose as she stepped inside. Todd, this place is a complete mess. Look at it. There's all sorts of junk scattered around. I don't even know where to start. Todd laughed, trying to see the bright side. Yeah, I won't lie, it's in pretty bad shape. But who knows, maybe we can fix it up. Camille looked around, skeptical. Todd, this looks like a dump for old junk. Everything's rusty. There are empty barrels, broken tool, and the smell of animals? I'm not sure we should even bother with this. Todd, however, seemed intrigued, almost as if he saw something Camille couldn't. He ran his hand along one of the dusty shelves, deep in thought. Well, I've always liked a good challenge, and this barn does have a certain charm, don't you think? A bit of cleaning and organizing, and who knows what we could do with this space. Camille crossed her arms, looking at Todd as if he were going mad. Are you serious? I was thinking of tearing it down and, I don't know, building a pool for the grandkids to play in when they visit. Todd smiled, shaking his head. I know, but just imagine, Camille, this place has potential. I could fix it up, make something useful out of it. We don't need to decide anything now, but just think about it. She sighed, still somewhat doubtful. All right, Todd, but let me tell you something. If you want to tackle this, you're on your own. Don't ask me to come back in here because that smell, honestly, it's too much for me. Todd laughed, already knowing it would take more than just a few kind words to convince her. Deal, I'll take care of it. You'll only see the final result. I promise you won't regret it. Camille looked into his eyes, seeing how committed he was to the idea. Okay, Todd, but only because you're asking so nicely. But don't think I've given up on the pool, all right? Camille shrugged, giving the barn one last glance before leaving. We'll see, Todd. We'll see. One quiet morning, Todd called her to sit on the porch. Camille, can I talk to you about the barn? Camille sighed, already guessing where this conversation was headed. Todd, if this is about the pool... No, just hear me out, he interrupted with a light smile. I know you don't see the barn the way I do, and I get it, I really do, but I have an idea. What if, instead of demolishing it, we turn the barn into something useful, a space we can all use? Camille crossed her arms, curious. And what do you have in mind, Todd? What can we do with that old place? Todd brightened up, sensing she was open to the conversation. I was thinking of creating a workshop inside, a place where we can store tools, work on projects, maybe even set up a space for you to paint if you'd like. And it doesn't have to stop there. We could make a cozy corner for the grandkids to play with games, books, a multifunctional space. Camille raised an eyebrow, considering the idea. A workshop and a space for the kid. That does sound better than just a pile of old wood. Exactly, Todd said, seizing the opportunity. I could renovate the barn, make the necessary improvements. It'll be a new space, one that can be used for so many things. And look, if after a while you still think the pool is a better idea, we can reconsider. How about that? Camille looked at Todd, seeing the determination in his eyes. He really believed in this idea, and she couldn't ignore how much he wanted it. All right, Todd. Let's do it your way. You can transform the barn, but only because I trust you and your vision. But remember, the pool is still in my plans. Todd smiled, relieved and grateful. Thank you, Camille. I promise I'll create something we'll all love. Camille smiled back, feeling more at ease. I'm counting on it, Todd. Todd threw himself into the project with enthusiasm. He spent hours in the barn, cleaning, organizing, and dreaming about what the space could become. The first few weeks involved a lot of hard work. Todd cleared out all the junk, fixed the shelves, and started planning where everything would go. One day, Camille passed by the barn door and saw Todd fully focused, placing new tools on a workbench he had just set up. He was so engrossed that he didn't even notice she was there. Todd, you're really making something of this place, aren't you? She said, stepping inside a bit further to see what he had done so far. Todd smiled when he heard her voice. Ah, Camille, I'm trying to get everything in order. Look at these new tools I bought, he said, pointing to the shelves that were starting to fill up with shiny, organized items. Camille looked around, impressed by the progress. Wow, this place is really starting to look like a proper workshop. You're taking this seriously, aren't you? Todd laughed, wiping his hands on a cloth. You know how much I enjoy these things, fixing, building. I want everything here to have its proper place so that anyone can use it when they need to. And besides, I'm thinking of a few projects. Camille observed the neatly arranged shelves, the hammers, saws, and screwdrivers perfectly aligned. It's looking good, Todd. I didn't think you'd transform this place so quickly. Todd walked over to her, still with a sparkle in his eyes. I want this barn to be useful for us, Camille. A place where we can create things, spend time together, and even relax. There's still a lot of work to do, but I'm liking how it's coming along. Camille smiled, seeing his joy. I'm starting to like it too, Todd. Maybe in the end you were right about this barn. Todd gently hugged her, pleased with the acknowledgement. This is just the beginning, Camille. You'll see. As the days passed, Camille began to notice that Todd was becoming more and more involved with the barn. Every week it seemed like new boxes were arriving at the door. They were always different tools, of all shapes and sizes. At first, she didn't pay much attention, but then she started getting curious about the number of things he was buying. One afternoon, while Todd was organizing yet another batch of tools, Camille appeared at the barn door with her hands on her hips. Todd, do you really need all this? He looked at her, holding a new drill. Ah, Camille, these tools are essential for what I'm planning here. Each one has its purpose. Camille frowned, looking at the shelves that were already full. But you already have so many things, Todd. I don't even know the names of half of them. What else are you planning to do in here? Todd laughed, placing the drill in its spot. I know it seems like a lot, but I'm thinking about all the details. I want the barn to be fully equipped for any project we might want to take on. And who knows, maybe even teach the grandkids a few things when they come to visit. She stepped closer, curiously eyeing a box he hadn't opened yet. But why so many new tools? Can't you use the ones you already had? Todd smiled, knowing she was more curious than concerned. Some of the old tools were worn out, and others weren't suited for what I'm planning. Plus, I wanted everything here to be top quality so it'll last for years. Camille watched him for a moment, thinking about how he was truly committed to this idea. You're really taking this seriously, aren't you? I've never seen you so invested in a project like you are now. Todd stepped closer, gently touching her shoulder. Because I want this place to be special, Camille. For us and for our family. I know it seems like a lot, but trust me, it'll be worth it. Camille sighed, still intrigued, but with a touch of affection in her voice. I trust you, Todd. I just hope you haven't bought any tools you don't even know how to use. Todd burst into laughter. "I can promise you that hasn't happened. Every single one of these tools will be well used, and you'll be surprised by what I'm planning." With the barn now fully equipped with tools, Todd decided it was time to take the next step. He started bringing home piles of high-quality wood and cans of paint. Camille watched as he unloaded the purchases from the car, curious about what he was planning next. "Todd, what are you going to do with all this wood?" she asked, peeking at one of the planks as he carried it into the barn. Todd smiled, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "I'm going to build new shelves for the barn. I want everything to have its place. And after organizing everything, I'm going to paint the entire barn. It's going to look brand new." Camille raised her eyebrows, impressed. "You're going to do all that by yourself? It sounds like a lot of work, Todd." He shrugged, not losing his enthusiasm. "It is a lot of work, but I'm excited about it. I want the barn to be perfect." In the days that followed, Todd spent hours in the barn, measuring, cutting, and hammering. The shelves began to take shape, each one meticulously assembled and fixed to the walls. Camille watched from a distance, noticing the care Todd put into everything he did. One afternoon, as he was painting the last wall of the barn, Camille stepped in, admiring the work. "Todd, this place is looking incredible. I didn't know you had so much talent for these things." Todd, covered in paint, turned to her with a satisfied smile. "Thanks, Camille. I'm doing my best. I wanted the barn to have a fresh look, a place we can use for anything we need." She looked around, noticing how the space had transformed. The walls, now painted a soft shade of blue, reflected the light coming in through the windows. The shelves, sturdy and well-made, were ready to hold whatever they needed to store. "You've really transformed this place, Todd. It feels like a completely different barn now," Camille said, genuinely impressed. Todd walked over, wiping a paint smudge from his hand. "I did this for us, Camille. I wanted you to see that this barn could be something special, and I'm not finished yet. There are still a few more things I want to do." Camille smiled, feeling a new sense of admiration for him. "I can see that, Todd, and I'm starting to think this barn might just be our special place after all." Todd hugged her lightly, pleased with the acknowledgement. "This is just the beginning, Camille. We're going to make this place something our family will love for many years." After all the work Todd had put into renovating the barn, Camille began to feel a bit anxious to see the final result. One day, as he was placing the last tools on the shelves, she approached and offered to help. "Todd, you've done so much on your own. Let me help you with the organization, at least," Camille suggested, stepping into the barn with a smile. But Todd, who was focused on hanging some tools, turned to her with a gentle yet firm look. "Camille, I really appreciate it, but this time I want to do it alone." She frowned, somewhat surprised by his response. "Alone? Why, Todd? We've always done everything together." Todd sighed and placed the tool he was holding back on the workbench. "I know, Camille, and I love when we do things together. But this barn, it's different. I wanted to create something special, something I could show you as a surprise, you know. Every detail here was thought out with a lot of care." Camille tilted her head, trying to understand. "But what's so special about it? You know I'd be happy to help." Todd smiled, taking her hand. "I know you would, and that means a lot to me. But I want you to see the final result without knowing everything beforehand. I want it to be something special for you too, not just a project we worked on together, but something you can admire, knowing I put my heart into it." Camille observed him for a moment, realizing how much this meant to him. "All right, Todd, I'll respect your wish, but you should know I'm dying of curiosity." Todd laughed, relieved that she understood. "I promise it'll be worth the wait, Camille. Just a little longer and everything will be ready." She smiled, leaning in to give him a gentle kiss on the cheek. "I trust you, Todd. I'll wait as long as it takes." Todd squeezed her hand affectionately. "Thank you, Camille. Soon you'll see what I've been working on, and I hope you'll love it as much as I've enjoyed making it." Camille gave the barn one last look before leaving, letting Todd continue his work. 3 years had passed since Todd started transforming the barn, and during that time, Camille and Todd had grown closer than ever. Now, with the barn completed and life in their new home in full harmony, they were about to celebrate a special milestone, their 30th wedding anniversary. On that day, the house was filled with joy. Their children and grandchildren had come to celebrate with them. The sound of laughter echoed through the halls, and the delicious smell of the cake Camille had baked filled the house. "Todd, it feels like just yesterday we moved here, and now we're here celebrating another year together," Camille said as she set the table for dinner. She paused for a moment, looking at the family gathered around. "Look at this. Everyone here, together. It's everything I've ever wanted." Todd smiled, coming up behind her to give her a hug. "Me too, Camille. Every year with you is a blessing, and having everyone here, our children and grandchildren, is the best gift we could ask for." As they finished preparing things, one of the grandchildren ran up to them with a mischievous smile on his face. "Grandpa, Grandma, what are we going to do after dinner?" Todd winked at Camille and answered the grandchild with a mysterious tone. "Ah, we have a special surprise for you tomorrow, but you'll only find out after everyone's had their breakfast." Camille laughed, loving the excitement in the children's eyes. "Your grandpa is always full of surprises, isn't he? But I promise it'll be worth the wait." The next day, Todd woke up before sunrise, feeling the excitement in his chest. He had planned something very special for Camille, something she would never forget. When he saw her wake up, he approached with a smile on his face. "Good morning, my dear," he said lovingly. "Today is a special day, and I've prepared 2 surprises that will make it unforgettable." Camille looked at him, curious and a bit surprised. "2 surprises, Todd? What are you up to?" Todd smiled, playfully mysterious. "All I can tell you is that you'll need to trust me and come along. No questions for now." Camille laughed, feeling the excitement grow. "All right, I trust you. But you know I'm not good with mysteries, right?" He winked, taking her hand and kissing it softly. "It'll be worth it, I promise." Todd asked her to get ready to go out. Camille, still intrigued, did as he asked, not knowing what to expect. When she was ready, Todd took her to the car and started driving down a quiet road, surrounded by trees and green fields. "Where are we going, Todd?" Camille asked, trying to guess. "You'll see," he said, keeping the suspense. "Just a little longer." Finally, they arrived at a place Camille didn't recognize. It was an open field, with a small cabin in the background, surrounded by flowers gently swaying in the breeze. Todd parked the car and helped her out. "This place... What is it, Todd?" Camille asked, looking around, amazed by the beauty of the spot. Todd led her to the cabin, not letting go of her hand. "This is a place I found some time ago when I was looking for inspiration for the barn, and I saved this place for today because I knew it would be perfect for us." As they entered the cabin, Camille was speechless. The interior was decorated with old photos, candles, and fresh flowers, creating a warm and intimate atmosphere. In the center, there was a table set for breakfast, elegantly arranged. "Todd, it's wonderful," Camille said, her eyes welling up. He embraced her tenderly. "I wanted today to be more than just a celebration. I wanted it to be a moment just for us, to remember everything we've been through and how much we still have to look forward to together." Camille looked at him, deeply moved. "You always know exactly what to say and do to surprise me, Todd. This is more than I could have ever dreamed of." Todd smiled, pulling out a chair for her to sit. "I promised it would be a memorable day, didn't I?" They sat down at the table, holding hands, exchanging smiles and memories. Camille knew, deep in her heart, that this would be a day she would treasure forever, a testament to Todd's love for her, as strong as it was the first day they met. After they returned home, Todd told the family to get ready for the big surprise of the day, but first he had to go to town to buy a few final items for the surprise. And so, that late afternoon, Todd was driving home. He had a smile on his face, thinking about how happy she would be with everything he had prepared. But on the way back, as he drove down a more isolated road, something unexpected happened. Todd noticed a strange car following him closely. He didn't pay much attention at first, but suddenly the vehicle sped up and overtook him, blocking the road ahead. Before he could react, 2 men got out of the car and quickly approached him with threatening looks. "Get out of the car now," one of them shouted, pointing a gun at Todd. Todd, with his heart racing, raised his hands, trying to stay calm. Okay, I'm getting out," he said, slowly opening the car door. As soon as he stepped out, the men surrounded him. Todd tried to explain that he had nothing of value, just some groceries, and that he was on his way home. But the robbers were nervous and impatient. When one of them tried to pull Todd's wallet from his pocket, there was a scuffle. Todd unintentionally made a sudden movement trying to pull away. Then it all happened in an instant. One of the men, startled and without thinking, pulled the trigger. The sound of the gunshot echoed down the deserted road, and Todd felt a sharp pain pierce his chest. He fell to the ground, clutching the wound, as the robbers, panicked, ran back to their car and sped away, leaving Todd alone lying on the road. Todd tried to breathe, but the pain was intense, and he knew something was terribly wrong. He thought of Camille, how he wanted to return to her, how there was still so much he wanted to do. As his strength faded, he whispered softly, as if speaking to her, "Camille, I'm sorry. I wanted so much to be with you today." His world began to darken, and the last images that crossed his mind were of Camille's smile, the laughter of the grandchildren, and the special evening he would never get to spend by her side. Todd closed his eyes for the last time, his heart heavy with sadness for leaving her behind. That evening the house was filled with joy as Camille eagerly awaited Todd's return. The children and grandchildren were all gathered, and she knew Todd had prepared something special for them. But as the hours passed and Todd didn't return, unease began to grow in her chest. "He's taking too long. This isn't normal," Camille said, looking out the window, trying to hide her worry. One of her sons, noticing the tension in his mother's voice, approached her. "Mum, maybe he got held up in traffic. You know how he likes to make everything perfect." Camille nodded, trying to calm herself, but the feeling that something was wrong wouldn't leave her. Suddenly the sound of the doorbell broke the silence. She quickly got up, her heart racing, expecting to see Todd at the door, ready to surprise her. But when she opened the door, she found 2 police officers, with serious expressions and eyes full of sorrow. "Mrs. Camille?" one of the officers asked, his voice low and careful. Camille felt a knot form in her throat. "Yes, that's me. What happened? Where is my husband?" The officers exchanged looks, clearly uncomfortable with what they had to say. "Ma'am, we're deeply sorry. Your husband, Todd, he was assaulted on his way home and, unfortunately, he didn't survive." For a moment, Camille's world stopped. Those words didn't make sense. She refused to believe it. "No, this can't be true. Todd, he was coming home, he was fine. You must be mistaken." One of Camille's sons approached, holding her before her legs could give way. "Mom, I'm so sorry." Camille looked at her son, and reality began to sink into her mind, bringing an unbearable pain. "No. Oh God, no. Todd." Tears started streaming down her face, and a deep sob escaped her lips. The children and grandchildren, who until then didn't understand what was happening, were shocked to hear the news. The house, which had been full of laughter, was now filled with a heavy silence broken only by Camille's crying. One of the grandchildren, still too young to fully understand, asked innocently, "Grandma, what happened to Grandpa? Isn't he coming back?" Camille hugged him, trying to hold back her sobs, but the words barely came out. Grandpa's not coming back, my love. He had to go to a very faraway place." The family gathered around her, trying to comfort her, but the pain was immense. Todd, who had always been the foundation, the heart of that family, was now gone. Camille, devastated by the loss, felt that a part of her own soul had left with him. All that remained was a deep sorrow, and the void left by someone she had never imagined living without. After Todd's funeral, the house felt strangely empty, as if the world around Camille had lost its color and sound. The children and grandchildren did their best to stay by her side, but there was a deep silence that no one could fill. Every corner of the house reminded her of Todd, and every memory was a dagger to her heart. Days later, as Camille tried to pull herself together and find some sense in her routine, the doorbell rang. She went to answer it, not knowing what to expect. At the door, there was a delivery man with a large wooden box. "Mrs. Camille?" the delivery man asked, reading the name on the package. "Yes, that's me," she replied, a bit confused. "What is this?" "It's a delivery in the name of Todd," said the man, looking at the large box with respect. He requested that it be delivered today. Camille felt a lump in her throat when she heard Todd's name. "You can leave it here, please," she said, pointing to a space next to the porch. The delivery man placed the box down carefully and said goodbye. Camille stood there, staring at the box for a few minutes, unable to move. Finally, with trembling hands, she began to open the package. As she removed the lid, her eyes filled with tears. Inside the box was a bookshelf, exactly like the one that had belonged to her mother, the same antique bookshelf she had loved so much and that had been destroyed in the fire. She ran her hand over the wood, recognizing every detail. Camille couldn't hold back her tears. "Todd, you did this for me?" she whispered, feeling a mix of sadness and gratitude so deep that it left her breathless. One of her sons, hearing his mother cry, stepped out onto the porch and saw the bookshelf. "Mom, what is this?" Camille, her voice choked with emotion, replied, "It was Todd. He had the bookshelf restored. He knew how much it meant to me." The son approached, admiring the craftsmanship. "My God, he did this to surprise you. He knew it would make you happy." Camille nodded, the tears flowing freely. "He always knew. Even without being here, he still found a way to show me how much he loved me." The family gathered around her, sharing that moment of emotion and reverence. The pain of loss was still deep, but in that moment, Camille felt as if Todd was there, beside her, making sure her most precious memories would never be forgotten. "He'll always be with us, Mom," said her son, hugging her. "In every gesture, in every memory." Camille looked at the bookshelf, feeling warmth in her heart. "Yes, he will. And every time I look at this bookshelf, I'll remember how much he loved me. Todd may be gone, but his love is still here, in every detail." The hours passed, and despite the pain, life in the house began to find a new rhythm. But there was one place Camille still didn't have the courage to visit: the barn. Since Todd's death, she had avoided going there, afraid of the memories and sadness that might surface. However, curiosity and a feeling that something important was still waiting for her began to grow inside her. While the family was gathered, Camille stood up and looked toward the barn. She took a deep breath and said, "I think it's time to see what Todd was doing in there." The children exchanged glances, noticing the determination in her voice. "Do you want us to go with you, Mom?" one of them asked gently. Camille nodded. "Yes. I don't think I can do this alone. But I feel like I need to see what he was preparing." With her children by her side, Camille walked toward the barn. The door, which had seemed so imposing before, now felt like a portal to the last memories Todd had left behind. When they reached the entrance, she paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and then, with a slight tremble in her hand, pushed the door open. As they entered, Camille was surprised. The barn was impeccably organized, with every tool in its place, but what caught her attention the most were the shelves and the carefully decorated space. In the center, there was a large workbench, and around it, various pieces of wood, paints, and brushes. But what truly left her speechless were the objects Todd had been restoring. She slowly approached, her eyes widening as she recognized the items. "These are my mother's china, and those paintings." He was restoring everything. One of the sons picked up one of the paintings, still unfinished. "He did this for you, Mom. He wanted to bring back everything you lost." Camille gently ran her hand over the shelves, where Todd had placed the china, vases, and other items she thought she would never see again. "He learned woodworking and painting, all of this, just to surprise me." She turned to her children, tears streaming down her face, but this time there was a touch of joy mixed with the sadness. "Todd always had such a big heart. He wanted to give me back a piece of my past, of our past." One of the grandchildren, who had been quiet until then, approached and hugged Camille. "Grandma, Grandpa did this because he loved you so much." Camille hugged him back, feeling Todd's love surrounding everyone there. "Yes, he did. And even though he's not here anymore, he's still taking care of us. Every gesture he made, every detail in this barn, is proof of the love he felt." One of the grandchildren, holding a small figurine Todd had restored, said with the innocence of youth, "Grandpa was a hero, wasn't he?" Camille smiled despite the pain, and replied with a choked voice, "Yes, he was. And not just for me, but for all of us." She looked around, seeing how much of Todd had remained there, not just in the things he restored, but in the love and care he put into every detail. The barn, which had once been just an old and forgotten space, was now a symbol of the eternal love Todd had for her. "They always say that love is something you carry with you," Camille said with a melancholic smile. "But Todd, he left his love here, so we would never forget." The children gathered around her, embracing her, and Camille felt more than ever Todd's presence there in every piece, in every painting, and in every gesture he had made for her. The barn wasn't just a workshop, but a monument to the love he had cultivated throughout their life together. As she explored the barn, Camille began to realize the true depth of what Todd had done. It wasn't just the fact that he had restored the pieces she loved, but what really touched her heart was the effort he had made in secret to learn something new, all out of love for her. One of the sons, examining one of the shelves, found an old notebook with worn edges. "Mom, look at this," he said, handing the notebook to Camille. She carefully opened the notebook, and as she flipped through the pages, she realized it was Todd's journal. The pages were filled with detailed notes on woodworking, painting, and restoration. There were sketches of furniture, drawings of the china, and even references to techniques he had learned over the years. "I never knew Todd was doing this. He learned everything on his own without saying a word to me," Camille said, her voice trembling with emotion. She ran her hand over a page where he had drawn the model of the bookshelf he had given her, identical to her mother's. One of the grandchildren, who was flipping through the pages beside her, commented innocently, Grandpa wrote here that he wanted to make you smile again." Camille couldn't hold back the tears. "He did this. All this work, all this effort, just to give back what I lost. He never wanted me to know. He wanted it to be a surprise, a gift." The children, equally moved, gathered around, reading Todd's words. "This is so much more than just a gift. He dedicated years to learning, mastering these skills. All for you, Mum," one of them said, holding her hand. Camille nodded, feeling Todd's love in every word, in every drawing. He was always like that, quiet, but full of love in everything he did. While I thought he was just tinkering in the barn, he was here, learning, creating, all to make me happy. She looked around, seeing the evidence of Todd's love in every detail of the barn. He wanted me to know that even after everything we lost, he could still give me something that meant the world to me. Camille then thought about each detail and approached the bookshelf. "This bookshelf, it's where my mother kept her special china," Camille said, her voice soft, almost as if she were talking to herself. "I remember when I was a little girl, how I loved opening those doors and seeing the plates and cups shining inside." One of the sons, curious, came closer and opened one of the cabinet doors. "And what else do you remember, Mom?" Camille smiled, the memories flowing like a river. "My mother always let me choose the cup I wanted to use when we had tea together. I felt so important, so special. And my father. He always said that those dishes were precious, not just for their value, but for the stories they told." She ran her hand over one of the shelves, remembering how her mother organized everything with such care. "Every time there was a special occasion, my mother would bring out this china, and the house would be filled with laughter, with conversations. It was as if that cabinet was the guardian of our best memories." One of the grandchildren, listening to the story intently, asked innocently, "Grandma, do you feel like you're there again when you look at the cabinet?" Camille, her eyes filled with tears of longing and happiness, nodded. "Yes, my love. When I see this cabinet, it's like I can hear my mother's voice calling me to tea, like I can feel my father's presence, telling me stories about each piece stored here." The children, touched by the depth of Camille's memories, hugged her. "Todd knew how much this meant to you, Mom. He brought back not just the things, but the memories they carry." Camille looked at the bookshelf, feeling wrapped in the memories of her childhood. "He brought back a part of me that I thought I had lost forever. Every detail of this cabinet reminds me of who I am, where I come from, and the love that has always surrounded me." As the days passed, while Camille spent more time in the barn surrounded by the memories that Todd had restored, a deep truth began to reveal itself to her. Each piece, Each detail that Todd had brought back showed that love manifests in the small things, in the quiet gestures that over time become the most precious memories. One afternoon, while Camille was sitting in the barn, looking at the organized shelves and the china that Todd had restored, one of the grandchildren approached and sat next to her. He remained silent for a moment, admiring everything around him. "Grandma, do you miss Grandpa?" he asked with the sincerity that only a child can have. Camille smiled, running her hand through her grandson's hair. "I do, my dear. I miss him a lot. But at the same time, I feel that he's still here, in everything he did." The grandson looked at one of the restored pieces and then back at his grandmother. "But why did Grandpa do all this, Grandma? Didn't he already give you a lot of presents?" Camille sighed, recalling all the little gestures Todd had made over the years. Grandpa always knew that the most important gifts aren't the ones you buy. They're the ones you make with love. And it doesn't matter if they're big or small. What matters is the love you put into them. She looked around the barn, feeling Todd's presence in every corner. Every gesture Grandpa made, from bringing me coffee every morning to the hours he spent here restoring these pieces, was his way of telling me he loved me. And that's what really lasts. Acts of love are what remain, even when the person isn't here anymore. The grandson watched her intently, absorbing her words. "So Grandpa did all this because he loved you very much, didn't he?" Camille smiled, feeling warmth in her heart. "Yes, my love. He loved me so much that he wanted me to always remember that, even when he wasn't here anymore." She pulled him into a tight hug, and as she did, she fully understood what Todd had left for her. It wasn't just restored objects. They were living proofs of a love that transcended time and absence. Camille looked up at the sky, as if she could see Todd smiling down at her, and she whispered softly, "Thank you, Todd, for every gesture, big or small. They are the proof of the love we always shared, and that will continue to live in me forever." The grandson, still hugging her, looked up and asked, "Grandma, can I do acts of love too, like Grandpa did?" Camille smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "Of course you can, my dear, and that's what makes life worth living. Every act of love you do, no matter how small, has the power to change someone's world." And in that moment, Camille knew that Todd's legacy would continue, not only in memories, but in the acts of love that she and her family would carry forward. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with soft colors, Camille sat on the porch of the house, looking out at the barn in the distance. Her thoughts were filled with everything that had happened, with everything Todd had left behind. Their story, marked by so many memories, now had a new meaning. One of her sons approached, sitting beside her. "Mom, you've been thinking a lot lately, haven't you?" Camille smiled, still looking at the barn. "Yes, I have. Thinking about everything Todd did, how much he loved me, and how every little gesture of his showed me that." Her son nodded, understanding what she was feeling. "You know, Mom, I think what Dad did teaches us a lot about the power of love. He didn't need to make grand declarations or grand gestures. His love was in the details, in the little things we often don't notice in the rush of everyday life." Camille nodded, feeling a deep peace in her heart. That's true. What Todd did, every piece he restored, every minute he spent in that barn, it was all motivated by the love he had for me, for our family. And it made me realize that love, when it's real, shows itself in the simplest things. It hides in the small gestures, but it's in those gestures that it becomes eternal. She turned to her son with a calm smile. What Todd left us wasn't just a renovated barn or restored memories. He left us a lesson about love, that true love doesn't need grand displays. It's in the daily gestures, in the quiet actions we do for others. Her son looked at her, admiring the strength and wisdom she was showing. "You're right, Mom. Dad taught us that true love is constant. It's in the little things we do every day. And those gestures, they have the power to change everything, to transform lives." Camille sighed, feeling wrapped in the tranquility of the moment. Yes, and that's the kind of love that stays, that remains alive even when the person is gone. Todd may not be here anymore, but his love still surrounds us in every detail, in every memory, and that's what really matters. They sat there in silence, watching the sunset, knowing that Todd had left them more than just material memories. He had left a legacy of love, showing that, in the end, it's the acts motivated by love that have the power to leave a lasting mark, a mark that will never be erased. And so we reach the end of this story. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment on what you thought or what you learned. Thank you very much. I'm leaving more stories at the end here that I'm sure you'll love. See you next time.